I found out my wife has been lying about being infertile and has been taking birth control in secret for 6 years. I was standing in our bathroom at 11:43 p.m. on a Thursday night, holding a blister pack of birth control pills I'd found wedged behind the loose baseboard under our sink when my wife walked in and smiled at me. Not a guilty smile, not a caught smile, just her normal, everyday smile, the one I'd been looking at for 8 years, the one I'd kissed goodnight probably 3,000 times. She looked at what I was holding, looked at my face, and said, "Oh, you found those." Like I'd discovered her secret stash of Halloween candy. My hands were shaking so badly the pills rattled in their plastic case, and I remember thinking, this is what shock feels like. Not screaming, not crying, just this complete surreal disconnect where your brain knows something catastrophic just happened, but your body hasn't caught up yet. I'd spent 6 years, 6 entire years, crying with her through negative pregnancy tests, holding her through fertility treatments that never happened because she always had some excuse, believing her when she said the doctors told her she was infertile. And here I was, holding 28 little pills that said everything I'd believed was a lie. I'd been married to Catherine for 8 years when I found them. We met in grad school. I was getting my MBA, she was finishing her master's in marketing, and we'd done everything right. Dated for 2 years, got engaged on a beach in California at sunset like something out of a movie, had a wedding with 200 guests that took a year to plan. We were those people, the couple that everyone said had it all figured out. We bought a house in the suburbs 3 years into our marriage, a 4-bedroom colonial with a yard big enough for a swing set and a dog we named Apollo. Catherine had this whole timeline planned out. We'd establish our careers first, pay down some debt, then start trying for kids around year 5. It made sense. We were responsible, smart. But when year 5 came around and she suggested we wait 1 more year, I didn't question it. When year 6 came and she said she wanted to start trying, I was over the moon. I remember the conversation exactly. We were sitting on the back deck drinking wine, and she said, "I think I'm ready to be a mom." I'd wanted kids since I was 25, so we started trying. Or at least, I thought we were trying. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I missed. How she never tracked her cycle the way other women trying to conceive did. How she'd always change the subject when I suggested we both get tested at the fertility clinic. How she cried every month when her period came, but never with the kind of desperation you'd expect from someone truly trying to get pregnant. I rationalized everything. I told myself she was just private about medical stuff, that she was handling the stress in her own way, that some women don't want to become obsessed with ovulation tracking. When she finally told me, about 9 months into trying, that she'd gone to see her gynecologist alone and been told she had severe endometriosis that made pregnancy unlikely, I believed her. Why wouldn't I? You don't question your wife when she's crying on the bathroom floor at 2 in the morning, telling you she's broken, that she can't give you the family you want. I held her. I told her I loved her no matter what. I meant it. I spent 3 years thinking we were dealing with her infertility together, researching adoption, talking about IVF, having those heavy conversations about whether we'd be okay with a childless life. All while she was taking 28 pills a month to make sure none of it ever happened. The night I found them started normally enough. Catherine had gone to bed early with a headache, or so she said, and I'd stayed up late working on a presentation for a client meeting. Around 11:30, I went upstairs to brush my teeth and noticed the faucet in our bathroom sink was dripping. Not unusual. The house was built in 1987, and things were always breaking. I got down on my knees to check the shutoff valve under the sink, and that's when I saw it. The baseboard along the cabinet base was slightly pulled away from the wall. Apollo had been scratching at it for weeks, and I'd been meaning to nail it back down. When I pushed it back into place, something fell out from behind it. A small fabric pouch, the kind you'd keep jewelry in. My first thought was that Catherine had hidden some surprise for me, an anniversary gift maybe, or a birthday present. We'd done that before, hidden things around the house for each other to find. I opened it, smiling. Inside was a CVS receipt from 3 weeks ago, a small notebook with dates and times written in Catherine's handwriting, and 3 blister packs of birth control pills. 2 were empty. 1 was half full. I sat there on our bathroom floor for probably 5 minutes, just staring at them, trying to make them make sense. The dates in the notebook went back almost 7 years. Every month, like clockwork, a date, a time, a check mark. Pill taken, pill taken, pill taken. There were probably 500 check marks, 500 deliberate decisions. 500 times Catherine had lied to me. The CVS receipt was for a prescription refill, her name, the medication, the date. I took photos of everything with my phone because some part of my brain was already thinking evidence, documentation, proof. Then I sat there holding that blister pack, listening to her breathe in our bedroom 15 feet away, and I felt something inside me break that I don't think will ever fully heal. I started scrolling through the dates more carefully, cross-referencing them with my phone calendar. The pattern became sickeningly clear. She'd been taking pills on days when we'd had what I thought were trying to conceive conversations. Days when she'd cried about negative pregnancy tests. Days when we'd been at family gatherings and my mother had asked hopefully if there was any news yet. I found an entry from March 15th, the day we'd visited my parents and announced we were officially trying for a baby. Everyone had been so excited. My dad had opened champagne. Catherine had given this beautiful speech about how ready she felt to become a mother. That night, according to her notebook, 10:47 p.m., pill taken, checkmark. I wanted to vomit. I pulled up our text messages from the past 6 years and started searching for keywords. Doctor, appointment, fertility, test. Found dozens of conversations where she'd referenced doctor visits that apparently never happened. Just left the gynecologist, not good news, from August 2019. Dr. Williams says my hormone levels are concerning, from February 2021. Dr. Williams didn't exist. I'd never met her, never seen paperwork, never been invited to an appointment, because there was no Dr. Williams. There was just Catherine, sitting in her car somewhere, texting me lies while probably listening to a podcast or grabbing coffee. It wasn't just the immediate lies, it was the architecture of deception she'd built, the performances. I remembered one night in particular, about 2 years ago, when Catherine had come home from a fertility consultation, looking devastated. She'd sat me down at our kitchen table, held my hands, and told me through tears that the specialist said her egg reserve was critically low, that even with IVF our chances were less than 5%. I'd cried with her, actually cried. We'd opened a bottle of wine and sat on the floor of our living room until 3 in the morning, talking about whether we could be happy without biological children, whether adoption was right for us, whether our marriage would survive the grief. She'd been so convincing. The tremor in her voice when she said, "I'm so sorry I can't give you this." The way she'd clung to me and whispered, "Please don't leave me over this." I'd been horrified that she'd even think I might leave. I'd held her face in my hands and promised her that she was more important to me than any hypothetical children, that we'd figure it out together, that nothing could break us. And the whole time, she'd been acting, playing a role, using my love for her as a weapon to keep me trapped in her lie. I stood up, walked into our bedroom, and turned on the light. She woke up squinting. "Hey, what's wrong?" she said. I held up the pills. For maybe 10 seconds, she just looked at them. Then she sat up and said, "Oh, you found those?" Not, "I can explain." Not, "I'm sorry." Not even panic. Just this flat acknowledgement, like I'd discovered she'd been eating cookies before dinner. I think that's what made me lose it. I didn't yell, I'm not a yeller, but my voice came out this strange, tight whisper that didn't sound like me at all. "What are these, Catherine?" She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapped her arms around them. "They're birth control pills." Her voice was calm. Too calm. "I can see that," I said. "Why do you have birth control pills hidden in our bathroom? You told me you were infertile." She looked at me then, and I swear to God, there was no shame in her face, no guilt, just this exhausted resignation. "I'm not infertile," she said. "I never was." The room tilted. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. "You've been lying to me for 6 years," I said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," she said. Just yes, not even an explanation attached to it. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I had no idea who this person was. "Why?" I asked. "Why would you do this?" She was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought she might not answer. Then she said, "Because I don't want children. I never did. And I knew if I told you that, you'd leave me." I stood up, walked out of the bedroom, and spent the rest of the night in the guest room downstairs, door locked, lights off, just lying there in the dark trying to process what she'd said. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, that calm, resigned expression, like she'd been waiting for this moment for years, like she'd already grieved the end of our marriage and moved on. I kept replaying conversations in my head, looking for the moment I could have known, the sign I could have seen. We'd talked about kids before we got married. I'd asked her directly if she wanted children, and she'd said yes. She'd smiled when she said it. She'd talked about names she liked, whether we'd find out the gender or wait, whether she'd go back to work or stay home. Had all of that been a lie, too? Was any of our relationship real? At some point around 4 in the morning, I got up and went through our home office, pulling out every medical document, every piece of paper related to her supposed infertility. There was nothing. No diagnosis letters, no test results, no doctor's notes. Just her word, and I'd believed it. The next morning, Friday, I didn't go to work. I called in sick for the first time in 3 years and sat at our kitchen table drinking coffee that tasted like cardboard, waiting for Catherine to come downstairs. She appeared around 8, already dressed for work, makeup perfect, like this was any other day. She poured herself coffee, leaned against the counter, and looked at me. "Are we going to talk about this?" she asked. My laugh came out bitter. "Talk about what? The fact that you've been lying to me for our entire marriage? That you let me believe we were struggling with infertility while you were secretly taking pills to prevent the one thing I wanted most? Sure, Catherine. Let's talk." She flinched. First real emotion I'd seen from her. "It's not that simple," she said. "Then explain it to me," I said. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty fucking simple. You lied. For years." She sat down across from me, wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "When we started dating, you talked about wanting kids constantly. It was always, when we have kids and our future family and all these plans. And I liked you so much. I thought maybe I'd change my mind. People do, right? So I said yes when you asked if I wanted children because I thought by the time it came up, I'd feel differently. But you didn't, I said. No, she admitted. I didn't. And by then we were engaged and planning a wedding, and I didn't know how to tell you. So I kept putting it off. For 8 years, I said. You put it off for 8 years. And when I brought it up, you didn't tell me the truth. You made up an entire medical condition. You cried on our bathroom floor and told me you were broken. Her eyes filled with tears then. I know it was wrong. But I couldn't lose you. I kept thinking I'd figure out a way to make it work, that maybe I'd change my mind, or that you'd change yours, or I don't know. I panicked. I stared at her. You panicked. So you lied. For 6 years. While I researched adoption agencies. While I talked to my parents about grandchildren they were never going to have. While I planned our entire future around working through your infertility together. I'm sorry, she whispered. But it was too late for sorry. Sorry doesn't fix 6 years of deception. Sorry doesn't give me back the time I spent believing I was part of a team, solving a problem together, when really I was the only problem. Me and my inconvenient desire for children. I asked her to leave. Not permanently, not yet, but I told her I needed her to stay somewhere else for a few days while I figured out what to do. She went to her sister's place without much argument, and I spent the weekend alone in our house, surrounded by everything we'd built together. The photos on the walls, the furniture we'd picked out, the dog we'd adopted because we thought it would be good practice for parenting. Every room felt like a lie. On Saturday morning, I did something I'd never done before in our marriage. I went through Catherine's things, her drawers, her closet, her desk, her laptop. I was looking for more evidence, more lies, more proof that the person I'd married was a stranger. What I found was worse than more lies. I found the absence of evidence. No journals where she'd wrestled with guilt, no drafts of confessions she'd never sent, no emails to friends expressing remorse. Instead, I found Google searches from 3 months ago. How to fake fertility problems, symptoms of endometriosis to tell husband, how long can you lie to spouse about wanting kids. She'd been researching, planning her lies, making them more convincing. I found a forum post she'd written under a pseudonym, asking other women how they'd successfully hidden not wanting children from their partners. The responses were chilling, women advising her to cry at specific times, to make up doctor appointments, to blame stress and diet, to suggest expensive treatments she could then claim didn't work. Catherine had taken notes. On Monday morning, I called my buddy Trevor, who'd gone through a brutal divorce 2 years ago, and asked for his lawyer's contact information. Trevor didn't ask questions, just sent me a text with a name. Diana Schultz, partner at Schultz & Goldman, specialized in family law, 23 years of experience. I called her office at 9:02 a.m. and got an appointment for that afternoon. Diana Schultz was in her early 50s, sharp-eyed, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a bun, and the kind of no-bullshit energy that made you trust her immediately. I sat in her office, dark wood furniture, law degrees on the wall, a photo of her with 2 teenage kids on her desk, and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad, her expression neutral. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me. First question, what do you want? Reconciliation or divorce? I don't know, I said honestly. I can't imagine trusting her again, but I also can't imagine ending an 8-year marriage over this. Over this, she repeated. Mr. Stevens, your wife didn't just lie about one thing. She constructed an elaborate deception that lasted years and affected major life decisions. She let you believe you were infertile as a couple. She allowed you to shoulder emotional burden for something that didn't exist. This isn't a small betrayal. I nodded. My throat felt tight. I know. Second question. Do you want children? Yes, I said. I do. Not right now necessarily, but someday. It's something I've wanted my whole life. Diana wrote something down. Then you need to understand that if you stay with Catherine, that door is likely closed. She's been consistent for 8 years. She doesn't want kids. That's not going to change because she got caught lying about it. The truth of that hit me hard. Third question, she continued. Do you believe her story about why she lied? That she thought she'd change her mind? I thought about that. I don't know. Maybe at first. But 6 years? That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Diana nodded. In my experience, people who lie on this scale usually have deeper issues with control, with honesty, with confronting uncomfortable truths. Even if you work through this specific deception, the pattern that created it will still be there. She opened a folder and pulled out some papers. Here's what I recommend. Individual therapy for you to process this betrayal. Couples therapy if you decide to attempt reconciliation, and a consultation with a reproductive endocrinologist. I blinked. A reproductive doctor? Why? Because, she said, you need independent medical confirmation of Catherine's fertility status. Right now, you have her word that she's not actually infertile. But given that she's been lying for years, you need objective verification. If there's even a small chance she has an underlying condition she's been hiding from you, you need to know. That hadn't even occurred to me. You think she might be lying about lying? I think you need facts, Diana said. Not stories, not apologies. Facts, documentation, medical records, the truth. I left her office with a stack of business cards, therapists, doctors, financial planners, and a crushing sense of finality. This was real. My marriage was ending, or at best, would never be what I thought it was again. I called Catherine that night and told her we needed to have a real conversation, not the half-confession we'd had on Thursday. She agreed to meet me at the house on Monday evening. I spent the hours before she arrived rehearsing what I wanted to say, but when she walked through the door at 7 p.m., all my prepared speeches evaporated. She looked tired, small. She sat on the couch, and I sat in the chair across from her, putting physical distance between us. I saw a lawyer today, I said. Her face went pale. Already? Did you think I wouldn't? I asked. Catherine, you lied to me for 6 years, about something huge. I don't know how to get past that. I don't even know if I want to. She twisted her wedding ring around her finger, a nervous habit I'd always found endearing. Now it just made me angry. What do you want from me? She asked. Honesty, I said. Real honesty. Starting now. Why didn't you just tell me you didn't want kids? Why go through this entire charade? She took a shaky breath. Because I was afraid. I knew how much kids meant to you, and I loved you. I didn't want to lose you. So you thought lying was better? I thought, she said slowly, that maybe if I bought enough time, you'd decide kids weren't that important, or that our life together was enough, or that we'd just drift past it. The audacity of the Tao, the sheer presumption, made my hands clench into fists. You gambled our entire marriage on the hope that I'd just give up on one of my biggest life goals? I know, she whispered. I know it was selfish. I know it was wrong. But I didn't know what else to do. You could have told the truth, I said. 8 years ago, before we got married. That's what you could have done. Would you have married me if I'd said I didn't want kids? I didn't answer right away. Because honestly, probably not. Children had always been part of my future. A non-negotiable part. And she'd known that. No, I said finally. I probably wouldn't have. She nodded like she'd expected that answer. So what now? Now, I said. You're going to prove to me that you're capable of telling the truth. Starting with a trip to a doctor. My lawyer wants you to get a full fertility workup from an independent specialist, not your regular gynecologist, someone who has no connection to you or your medical history. Her eyes widened. You don't believe me that I'm not infertile? I don't believe anything you tell me anymore, I said flatly. So yes, if you want any chance of fixing this, you'll make an appointment and get tested. She agreed. Whether out of guilt or genuine desire to save our marriage, I didn't know and didn't care. 2 days later, we sat together in the waiting room of Riverside Fertility Center, the awkward silence between us louder than any conversation. Dr. Nina Kowalski was a reproductive endocrinologist with 14 years of experience, a warm smile, and the kind of direct communication style that left no room for ambiguity. She reviewed Catherine's medical history, or lack thereof, with a furrowed brow. So you've been telling your husband you're infertile due to endometriosis, but you've never actually been diagnosed? She asked Catherine. Correct, Catherine said quietly. Dr. Kowalski nodded without judgment. Let's run a full panel. Hormone levels, ovarian reserve, ultrasound, HSG to check your tubes. We'll know within 2 weeks if there are any fertility issues. I sat through that appointment like a ghost, present, but not really there, watching Catherine answer questions, undergo tests, play the part of a concerned patient when we both knew this was all theater. The results came back exactly as I'd expected. Catherine was perfectly fertile. No endometriosis, no blocked tubes, no hormonal abnormalities. Dr. Kowalski delivered the news with professional cheer, telling Catherine that whenever she was ready to conceive, she should have no problems. Catherine thanked her. I felt nothing. In the car afterward, Catherine tried to talk. I know this doesn't fix anything, but at least now you know I wasn't lying about being able to get pregnant. I really am fertile. That's supposed to make this better? I asked. That you've been preventing a pregnancy you were fully capable of having? For 6 years? She went quiet. I drove us home in silence. That night, I moved all my clothes into the guest room. Catherine didn't protest. Over the next week, something else started bothering me, a question I couldn't shake. Had she been lying about other things too? I spent an entire Saturday going through our financial records, bank statements, credit card bills, receipts. I found a pattern, monthly charges to CVS Pharmacy going back 7 years, always for the same amount, $38.50, her birth control prescription. I'd seen these charges before, hundreds of times while balancing our accounts and never questioned them. When I'd asked once what they were for, she'd said, just prescriptions, the usual stuff. I'd assumed she meant allergy medication or vitamins, the usual stuff. The phrase made me want to break something. I dug deeper, found charges to a medical billing company I didn't recognize, Women's Health Associates of Boston, $240, quarterly, for the past 6 years. I called them Monday morning, pretending to be following up on Catherine's account. The receptionist was cheerful and helpful. "Oh yes, Mrs. Stevens is one of Dr. Rebecca Thornton's regular patients. Annual wellness exams and prescription management." "Prescription management," I repeated. "Yes, for her contraceptive care. Dr. Thornton has been managing that for, let me see, looks like about 7 years now." I thanked her and hung up. So Catherine did have a real doctor. Dr. Rebecca Thornton. Someone who'd been actively helping her maintain the lie, prescribing birth control while Catherine told me she was infertile. I added this information to the growing file I was building, evidence of systematic deception. Over the next few weeks, I started therapy. My therapist, Dr. Leonard Huang, was a soft-spoken man in his 60s who specialized in trauma and betrayal. He had a small office in downtown, decorated with plants and soft lighting, and he didn't push me to talk before I was ready. "Betrayal in marriage is complex," he said during our third session, "especially when it involves reproductive deception. You're not just grieving the lie itself. You're grieving the time lost, the trust destroyed, the future you thought you had." "I feel stupid," I admitted. "Like I should have known. How did I miss 6 years of birth control?" "Because you trusted your wife," Dr. Huang said simply. "Trust isn't stupidity. Trust is the foundation of marriage. She violated that, not you. But knowing intellectually that it wasn't my fault didn't make it hurt less. I'd lie awake at night replaying every conversation, every moment I could have questioned her story. The time she canceled a fertility doctor appointment because she wasn't ready. The time I suggested we both get tested and she'd cried and said she needed to try naturally first. The time I brought up IVF and she'd shut down completely, saying she wasn't ready to think about that yet. Every red flag I'd smoothed over, rationalized, accepted. Dr. Huang helped me understand that I'd been a victim of what he called strategic deception. Lies carefully constructed over time to maintain plausibility. "Your wife didn't lie once," he explained. "She built an architecture of lies, each one supporting the others. That's not something you could have easily detected, especially not from inside the relationship." In one session, Dr. Huang asked me to describe the moment I found the pills in detail. As I talked through it, the dripping faucet, the loose baseboard, the fabric pouch, the notebook, I started to cry for the first time since this all began. "I keep thinking about all the times I held her while she cried about being infertile," I said. "All the times I reassured her that I loved her anyway, that we'd be okay, and she was crying because she was trapped in her own lie, not because she was actually sad. Or," Dr. Huang said gently, "she was crying because she knew she was hurting you and felt guilty, but still couldn't bring herself to tell the truth. Catherine's emotions during those moments may have been real, just not for the reasons you thought. That possibility was somehow worse. It meant she'd known all along that she was destroying me, and she'd done it anyway." "How do I forgive that?" I asked. "Do you want to?" Dr. Huang countered. I sat with that question for a long time. Did I want to forgive Catherine? Did I want to rebuild our marriage, knowing what she'd done? Did I want to spend the next 40 years wondering what else she might be lying about? "No," I said finally. "I don't think I do." Dr. Huang nodded. "That's okay. Forgiveness isn't mandatory. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is acknowledge that someone has hurt you beyond repair and walk away." Catherine and I tried couples therapy too. Dr. Huang recommended someone, and we saw Dr. Grace Pemberton, a marriage counselor with 30 years of experience, twice a week for a month. It was brutal. Catherine cried through most of the sessions. I sat there numb, listening to her apologize, explain, justify. Dr. Pemberton didn't sugarcoat things. "Catherine, what you did constitutes reproductive coercion," she said bluntly during one session. "You deliberately prevented your husband from making informed decisions about his reproductive future." Catherine's face crumpled. I know it's unforgivable." "It's not about forgiveness yet," Dr. Pemberton said. "It's about accountability. Can you acknowledge the full scope of harm you caused?" In one particularly difficult session, Dr. Pemberton asked Catherine to list every specific lie she'd told me over the past 6 years. The exercise took 40 minutes. Catherine, tears streaming down her face, recounted them all. The fake doctor visits, the manufactured test results, the staged emotional breakdowns, the excuses for why we couldn't afford IVF when I'd suggested it, the times she'd blamed stress or diet for her fertility issues, the lies to our families about upcoming appointments, the performances at holidays when relatives asked about our plans. By the end of it, I'd stopped listening to the words and was just watching her face, the face I'd woken up next to for 8 years, and wondering how I'd ever trusted it. "Daniel," Dr. Pemberton said gently, "how does hearing all this make you feel?" I couldn't speak for a minute. Then, like I never knew her. Like I married a stranger who was really good at pretending to be someone else. Catherine let out a sob. "I am the person you married. I made terrible choices. I was a coward." "You were a liar," I said flatly. "There's a difference." "Doctor," Pemberton intervened. "Catherine, I want you to understand something. What you did wasn't just lying about a preference or keeping a secret. You constructed an alternate reality and forced Daniel to live in it. You made him question medical facts, blame himself, shoulder emotional burden for something that didn't exist. This is psychological manipulation on a profound level. I never meant to— Catherine started. Intent doesn't matter, Dr. Pemberton interrupted. Impact does. And the impact is that Daniel can't trust his own judgment anymore. You've made him doubt his ability to read people, to trust his instincts, to know what's real. That's trauma, Catherine. That's what you've inflicted on your husband. The silence after that was deafening. In our final couples session, Dr. Pemberton asked us each to articulate what we wanted from the marriage going forward. Catherine went first. I want to rebuild trust. I want to prove to Daniel that I can be honest. I want us to work through this and come out stronger. Dr. Pemberton nodded and turned to me. Daniel, I want a divorce, I said. It was the first time I'd said it out loud, and the words felt both terrible and liberating. Catherine's face went white. But we've been working so hard. You've been working hard, I corrected. I've been sitting here realizing that even if you never lie to me again, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if you are. And that's no way to live. And Catherine tried. She really did. She wrote me letters apologizing. She offered to sign a post-nuptial agreement giving me everything in a divorce. She went to individual therapy. She stopped wearing her wedding ring without me asking. But none of it changed the fundamental truth. I couldn't trust her. Every time she spoke, I wondered what she wasn't telling me. Every time she touched me, I felt a physical revulsion I couldn't control. And every time I looked at her, I saw those pills, heard her say, "Oh, you found those," in that flat, resigned voice. After 6 weeks of trying, I told her I wanted a divorce. We were sitting in Dr. Pemberton's office when I said it, and Catherine's face crumbled, but she didn't argue. Okay, she whispered, if that's what you need. It is, I said, and I meant it. Diana Schultz filed the papers 3 days later. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, which meant we didn't have to prove wrongdoing, just irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. Given that we'd been married 8 years and had significant shared assets, the process would take at least a few months, but Diana was confident we could settle without going to trial. The divorce proceedings revealed more than I'd expected. During discovery, Diana subpoenaed Catherine's medical records from Dr. Rebecca Thornton. What we found was damning. 7 years of documented birth control prescriptions, annual renewals, consultation notes. In one note from 2021, Dr. Thornton had written, "Patient reports continued desire to prevent pregnancy. Discussed husband's belief that patient is infertile. Patient became emotional, expressed guilt, but stated she is not ready to disclose truth. Recommended therapy. Patient declined." Catherine's own doctor had known about the deception and suggested therapy, and Catherine had refused. That meant she'd had opportunities to come clean, to get help, to fix this before it destroyed our marriage. She'd chosen not to. Diana used this documentation to push for a more favorable settlement for me. "This is evidence of fraud," she explained. "Catherine fraudulently induced you into continuing a marriage under false pretenses. In Massachusetts, that can affect asset division." In the end, I got the house, most of our savings, and Catherine agreed to pay my legal fees. She didn't fight any of it. Her lawyer, a tired-looking man named Gregory Burke, who seemed like he'd rather be anywhere else, barely mounted a defense. I think Catherine had told him the truth about what she'd done, and he knew there was no winning this case. Catherine moved out officially in late November, taking Apollo with her because she'd been his primary caretaker. I kept the house. We divided our savings 50-50, split the retirement accounts, sold the furniture neither of us wanted. It was all very civil, very adult, and it destroyed me. I spent Thanksgiving alone, sitting in an empty house that still smelled like Catherine's perfume, eating takeout Chinese food and watching football. My parents called, worried. I told them Catherine and I were working through some things. I couldn't bring myself to say the word divorce yet. Couldn't explain what she'd done without shattering their image of her, of us, of the marriage they'd celebrated 8 years ago. But by early December, I couldn't keep it from them anymore. I drove to their house in Connecticut on a Sunday afternoon and told them everything. My mother cried. My father's face went through about 6 different emotions in 30 seconds. Shock, anger, confusion, then this deep, bone-tired sadness. 6 years, my mom kept saying. She let us think all those conversations about grandchildren, about how you were trying, her voice broke. We bought that house with the extra bedrooms because you said you'd need space for a nursery. That hit me hard. I'd forgotten about that. 3 years ago, when Catherine and I had been house hunting, we'd specifically looked for places with at least 4 bedrooms. My parents had helped with the down payment, explicitly saying they wanted to make sure their future grandchildren had space to visit, to grow up with memories in a real family home. They'd given us $75,000 based on a lie Catherine was actively maintaining. My father stood up, paced to the window. "Does Catherine's family know?" I shook my head. "I don't know. Maybe her sister, since Catherine's been staying with her. But I doubt her parents know the truth." "They should," my father said firmly. "They should know what their daughter did." My mother looked uncertain. "David, is that really necessary?" "Yes," he said, turning to face us. "It is. Because if Daniel is going to be painted as the bad guy in this divorce, if people are going to wonder why he's leaving such a nice girl, then the truth needs to be out there. He looked at me. Unless you don't want that. I thought about it. Did I want Catherine's parents to know? Jim and Carol had always been kind to me, welcoming. They'd treated me like a son, but they'd also raised Catherine, and somewhere in that upbringing she'd learned that lying was acceptable if it got her what she wanted. They should know, I said finally. But I don't want to be the one to tell them. My father nodded. I'll handle it. 3 days later, he called Catherine's father and had what he later described as a very difficult conversation. Jim was apparently devastated. He called me that evening, his voice shaking. Daniel, I don't know what to say. Carol and I, we had no idea. None. If we'd known Catherine was doing this— I know, Jim, I said. I don't blame you. She's our daughter and we love her, he continued. But this is unconscionable. I'm so sorry. For what she did, for the years she took from you, for the grandchildren Carol and I thought we'd— His voice cracked. We're so sorry. That conversation stayed with me. Catherine hadn't just betrayed me. She'd betrayed both our families, stolen hope from people who loved her, who'd supported her, who'd believed in us. My mother later told me that Carol had called her, crying, saying she didn't know how to face me at family gatherings anymore. I told my mom to tell her it wasn't her fault, that I didn't hold her responsible for Catherine's choices. But the damage was done. Our families, who'd been planning shared grandchildren and holiday gatherings for years, now had to navigate this awkward, painful reality. Trevor checked in regularly, brought me groceries when he noticed I wasn't eating, dragged me out for beers when I'd been alone too long. You're going to be okay, he kept saying. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you will. I wanted to believe him. Some days I did. Most days I didn't. In early January, Diana called me with news. The divorce was nearly finalized, but Catherine's lawyer had reached out with an unusual request. Catherine wanted to meet with me, alone, one last time before we signed the final papers. You don't have to agree to this, Diana said. In fact, I'd advise against it. What could she possibly say at this point that would make any difference? But I was curious. After months of lawyers and paperwork and clinical division of assets, part of me wanted to look Catherine in the eye and ask the one question that had been haunting me. Did she ever really love me? I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown on a Monday morning. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She'd lost weight. Her hair was shorter. She looked older than she had 3 months ago. Thanks for coming, she said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, I admitted. Why did you want to see me? She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, the same nervous gesture I'd seen 1,000 times. I wanted to tell you something. Something I should have said months ago, but couldn't. I waited. She took a breath. My therapist helped me understand why I did what I did. It wasn't just about not wanting kids. It was about control. I grew up in a house where I never had any control over anything. My mom made every decision, from what I wore to what I studied to who I dated. When I met you, you were so sure about everything, so confident about our future, and part of me loved that. But part of me also felt like I was being swept along again, like I didn't have a say. So you lied, I said, to maintain some illusion of control. Yes, she said quietly. I convinced myself that it was justified, that if you really loved me, you'd choose me over having kids eventually, that I was protecting both of us from a decision that would end our marriage. But you weren't, I said. You were just delaying the inevitable while stealing years of my life. I know, she whispered. I know that now. And I'm so sorry, Daniel. Not just sorry I got caught, sorry for what I did, for the pain I caused, for the trust I destroyed. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did was unforgivable. I looked at her, this woman I'd planned to spend my life with, and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering love, just emptiness. Thank you for telling me, I said. I hope you get the help you need. What about you? She asked. Will you be okay? Eventually, I said. I think so. We sat there for a moment longer, then I stood up. Goodbye, Catherine. Goodbye, Daniel, she said. And I walked out of that coffee shop knowing I'd never see her again. The divorce was finalized on a Monday in early February. 8 years of marriage ended with a judge's signature and a stamped document. Catherine and I didn't speak at the hearing. Our lawyers handled everything. Afterward, Diana shook my hand and said, You did the right thing. I know it hurts now, but you freed yourself from a relationship built on deception. That takes courage. I drove home, hung my coat in the closet, and sat on my couch for probably 2 hours, just existing. Finally, I texted Trevor. It's done. He showed up 30 minutes later with a 6-pack and a pizza. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. That night, alone again after Trevor left, I pulled out my phone and opened a document I'd been working on for weeks. A timeline of everything that had happened, from the moment I found the pills to the finalized divorce. Writing it out, had been Dr. Huang's suggestion, a way to process the trauma and see the full scope of what I'd been through. Looking at it now, months later, it still didn't seem real. 6 years of my life, stolen by someone who claimed to love me. But somewhere in the middle of that pain, I found something unexpected. Clarity. Catherine had made her choice years ago. She'd chosen her desires over honesty, her comfort over my trust. And I'd finally made my choice too, to walk away from someone who saw me as a problem to manage rather than a partner to respect. The house felt emptier than it ever had, but it also felt like mine. No more lies hiding behind baseboards, no more performances, just space to rebuild, to figure out who I was without her, to imagine a future that wasn't built on deception. 3 months later, I ran into Catherine at the grocery store. It was a Saturday morning, and I was picking up eggs and coffee, and there she was in the cereal aisle, looking exactly like she always had. She saw me, froze, then gave me this small, sad smile. "Hi, Daniel." "Hey," I said. The silence stretched awkward and painful. "How are you?" she asked finally. "Better," I said, and I meant it. I was better. Not healed, but better. She nodded. "I'm glad. I really am." She paused, bit her lip. "I'm seeing someone. A therapist, I mean. Working through a lot of things." "That's good," I said. And I meant that too. Whatever Catherine had going on inside her head, whatever made her think lying for 6 years was acceptable, she needed professional help to unpack it. "I never meant to hurt you," she said quietly. "I know you won't believe that, but it's true." I looked at her. Really looked at her for the first time since I'd found those pills, and I realized something. I didn't hate her. I was angry and hurt and betrayed, but I didn't hate her. She'd made terrible choices, but she was still human, still someone I'd loved once. "I believe you didn't want to hurt me," I said, "but you did anyway, and that's something you have to live with." She nodded, eyes shining with tears. "I know." We said goodbye, and I finished my shopping, and I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. Because that's what closure feels like, I guess. Not dramatic, not cathartic, just this quiet acceptance that some things break and don't get fixed, and that's okay. Last week, I went on my first date since the divorce. Her name is Rachel, she's a teacher, and we met through a friend of Trevor's. We got coffee and talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. Books, travel, the weird quirks of living in Massachusetts. I told her I was divorced, that it had been messy, and that I was still figuring things out. She told me she understood, that she'd been through her own heartbreak. When we said goodbye, she hugged me, and it felt good. Not complicated, just good. I don't know if I'll see Rachel again, or if I'm even ready for something new, but for the first time in 8 years, I'm building a future based on truth. My truth. What I want, what I need, what I deserve. Catherine made her choices. Now, I'm making mine. The house is quiet tonight. Apollo isn't here to greet me when I walk through the door, and there's no one waiting in the kitchen asking about my day. But the silence doesn't feel heavy anymore. It feels like space. Space to heal. Space to grow. Space to become whoever I'm supposed to be next. I still think about those pills sometimes, about holding them in my shaking hands and watching my marriage end in real time. But mostly, I think about what came after. The therapy, the divorce, the slow, painful rebuilding of a life I thought I'd already built. If you're reading this, if you're going through something similar, here's what I learned. Trust your gut. Don't rationalize away red flags. And if someone lies to you about something fundamental, believe the lie, not their excuses for it. Because the truth is, people who love you don't steal years of your life for their own comfort. They don't construct elaborate deceptions to avoid difficult conversations. They don't make you doubt your own reality. Real love is honest, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And I deserve that. We all do. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.